Hi and welcome to my art and fiction channel. I'm Adele and today I'm going to be sharing with you the opening section of Bethany Rose, which is the third novel in the Artisan-Sorcerer series. If it grabs your interest, I'll leave some information down below in the section for you and you can pick up your own copy. Meanwhile, I just hope you enjoy listening to this. Thanks for tuning in. Part 1. Sherwood Rise. Your choice is stark, said the bank manager, whose suit was as funereal as his manner. If you can't raise the money to pay off these debts, then I have to recommend that you file for bankruptcy. But I didn't run up these bills. Bethany Rose's fingers kept fidgeting with the hem of her skirt. He sighed. But as your late husband's next of kin, you inherit his debts. She wriggled on the uncomfortable office chair. If I'm declared bankrupt, I'd lose my home, wouldn't I? Paul Doran nodded. All your property and other assets would be seized to recoup losses. He watched the young woman's reaction. She was still a girl, really. He was not without compassion, but his hands were tied. Business did not allow much room for mercy. What if I sell my home? Her voice trembled. Paul prayed she wouldn't start crying. He hated it when clients turned on the waterworks. It embarrassed him and did nothing to move proceedings to a smooth conclusion. I mean, she said, straightening her slender shoulders, if I'm going to lose my home anyway, I might as well turn it to some advantage. Paul rhythmically tapped his pen on the edge of his notepad. That would be one solution. She took a deep breath to push down her despair. Okay, I'll go to an estate agent as soon as I leave here. Can you hold off the wolves for long enough for my property to sell? If you can provide written evidence that your property is for sale, then yes, I think we can do that for a short while. But you'll have to agree to a quick sale. That will mean accepting a lower market price. Bethany Rose said, I'll get the estate agent's letter to you by tomorrow. Paul held out his hand to shake on the agreement. Then I'll see what I can do. I don't know how you can stand it, said Sarah, sipping piping hot lemon tea. She gazed out of the bungalow's front window and across the small lawn to the scarlet for sale sign. How can you bear to leave? Bethany Rose tried to look nonchalant, but the dark shadows around her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. It's not as if I have a choice. Anyway, this place gives me the creeps now. Sarah sharply turned to look at Bethany. Have you seen Brian? Since he died, I mean. Have you seen... There was a pause. Then Bethany said, I've not seen Brian's ghost, if that's what you mean. But sometimes, and I know this is going to sound really stupid, it feels as if he's standing right behind me. I know it's my own imagination. It has to be, right? And it doesn't happen all the time, just when I'm not expecting it. Maybe it's a normal part of grief. Maybe it'll wear off after a while. But it's as if he's looking over my shoulder. It's horrible. Sarah struggled to find something to say. Things like this weren't supposed to happen to people of their age. At least not according to rosy romantic novels. She sighed heavily and looked at the ceiling to blink back the stab of tears. She knew almost nothing about grief, other than through watching Bethany Rose's experience of it. It doesn't seem 5 minutes since we were at high school together. Bethany nodded, curling her feet up on the sofa. That feels like a lifetime ago now, but it's only 6 months. Sarah rummaged in her bag for a tissue, her shoulder-length brown hair swinging forwards with the movement. Over the radio, the police's Don't Stand So Close to Me gave way to Barbara Streisand's Woman in Love. What did your mum say when you told her? About selling this place? Oh, you know her. Sarah laughed quietly and walked away from the window to an armchair. I'm sure she means well, really. Bethany set her cup on the low glass table, then nestled back into the sofa, her mouth a tight line. Sarah frowned, realising she had said the wrong thing. She rubbed a knee through her tan corduroys. "Are you going to go back to living with your parents? After this place is sold, I mean." "It'll be a cold day in Hades before I do that." Sarah offered her friend a little smile. Bethany had only shared the barest slivers of insight into her family life. Even those had been enough to show that beneath the Rathbones' respectable working-class veneer, things were seriously wrong. "So what will you do?" Bethany Rose shrugged and said, "That will depend on how much money is left after I've cleared Brian's debts. I could punch him. I mean, really, really punch him hard, over and over. I am so angry with him. Even though I miss him like crazy, I could murder him for leaving me with this mess." "Will you rent somewhere?" Sarah didn't know what else to say. "Maybe," said Bethany, "but where? Finding a flat here in Nottingham is so expensive, and I don't suppose many landlords will want to rent to a 16-year-old anyway. I'll have to get a job. I've been looking around." Sarah laughed aloud. "A job? You'll be lucky, with 5 million people on the dole. And those are just the official figures, and we all know those are lies. There's a whole pile of people Thatcher's government don't even count. Why do you think my parents made me go to college? Because there are no jobs." Bethany sighed. "Maybe I'll drop lucky." "Anyway," said Sarah, trying to offer some comfort, "once you've rented somewhere, at least you'll already have all your lovely furniture." She patted the chair's plump arm. "No, I won't," Bethany said, sweeping her hip-length raven hair over the shoulder of a long-sleeved T-shirt. "Brian bought all this on loan, on HP, on credit cards. It all belongs to the bank, really. We've not owned this house long enough for it to have increased much in value, and legal fees have to come out of any profits too. No, I'll have to sell everything I own." "Are his debts really that bad?" Bethany Rose nodded. "It must have been horrible, finding out only when the bills started rolling in after he'd died. You'd really had no idea he'd borrowed so much money." "Not a clue. I know it sounds naive. I'd help you out, but I've no money either." Bethany smiled. "I know that. We're only 16. This is a situation for adults, really." "So much for the glories of being a teen bride." Bethany Riley agreed. "Or for being a teen widow." Bethany Rose pushed the vacuum cleaner over the bedroom carpet. There were some people coming to view the bungalow shortly, and she had reluctantly decided it was in her own interests to make the place look presentable, even though her feet were aching after walking home from college to save on bus fare. The rug needed shaking. She switched the vacuum off and carried the rolled-up rug into the small patio garden. She and Brian had enjoyed sitting out here, reading The Face and the NME, sipping cola and laughing about all sorts of silly stuff. This hadn't seemed important at the time, but now those hours felt precious. She forced such thoughts aside and concentrated on vigorously shaking the rug. She didn't have time for tears, not with people coming round. Tears would have to wait for later, after the prospective buyers had finished picking over the merits of this newly built bungalow, which was supposed to have given Brian and herself a good start in life. As she trudged back inside, Bethany could not help feeling resentful. How many other girls her age were dealing with a situation like this? Not many. Most would be lounging in their bedrooms over homework, or chatting with friends about boys and clothes and music. That's what Bethany wished she was doing right now, instead of boring housework. She finished the vacuuming, then stored the machine away. Then she lingered in the doorway, feeling lost, feeling empty. And there it was again, that skin-crawling sensation of being watched. She caught the faintest whiff of Brian's unique scent, a subtle mixture of musk and medicated shampoo. Her head snapped round. But there was no one standing behind her. Of course there wasn't. It was just her imagination being stupid again. She rubbed her arms to ward off the sudden chill and went to put the kettle on. She switched the radio on for some noise. The Nolan sisters' "I'm in the mood for dancing" chirped through the tinny speaker. It was like something from a doll's house, this sparkling white kitchen. Everything was new and modern, and it already felt as if it wasn't hers anymore. This was another thing she'd just have to get used to. She shivered and reached for a cup. Drink made, she settled herself down at the small dining table and opened one of her college books. She'd an essay to write about the influence of Japanese pottery on the work of contemporary English potters. She could make some notes for it before the prospective buyers arrived, though the effort involved seemed a bit pointless now, as she would probably have to drop out of college soon due to financial pressures. Still, she loved working with clay. "Your home is lovely," said a smiling Mrs. Hughes. "Yes," agreed her husband, "it's just the sort of place we're looking for." The estate agent beamed confidently. "For a 3-bedroom bungalow in this area and in this excellent condition, you'll not find a more attractive asking price." Bethany perched self-consciously on the edge of a dining chair. Mrs. Hughes asked, "And the carpets are included in the price?" Bethany nodded. "Carpets and curtains, and the bathroom and kitchen fittings. I'm also selling all of the furniture, if any of that interests you." Mr. Hughes raised his eyebrows slightly. "The furniture?" Bethany shrugged. "All of it. Everything." Mrs. Hughes frowned, puzzled. "You're very young to own a house." "Everything's legal and above board," said the estate agent firmly. She had advised Bethany not to mention anything about Brian dying here. That sort of information could put off some buyers. "Why have you put your house on the market?" asked Mr. Hughes. "I'm moving to another area," said Bethany Rose, without thinking. She immediately wondered why she said that. The words had just popped out of her mouth. She brushed it aside, dismissing the easy fib as just another of her little peculiarities. However, the Hugheses readily accepted her explanation. They were too excited about the prospect of buying this lovely new bungalow to bother about the seller's real motives. They all shook hands, and then the Hugheses left with the estate agent to return to the agent's office, where the legal process of purchasing the property would begin. "So, when are you going to move?" asked Sarah, nibbling one of the chocolate digestives she brought round. "I have no idea." "But Bethany, the buyers want to move in by the end of this month." "I know. I have been looking for a flat to rent, but without a job, most landlords don't want to know." Sarah scowled. "I could ask my parents if you could live with us." Both girls knew they'd refuse. "No, it's okay. Something will come along." They were sitting in the front room. The scarlet "for sale" sign now had a sold badge nailed across it. Sarah said, "There's student accommodation. That should be cheap at least." Bethany nodded. "Yes, and that's what I'll probably have to accept." She ran her gaze around the room. Student housing would be quite a step down after living here. She refused to let that recognition depress her further. "A house clearance company will be here tomorrow. I'll have to push for the best price I can. The trouble is, they'll see me and think I'm just another dozy kid who they can rip off." "Don't give 'em an inch, girl," grinned Sarah. Bethany smiled faintly. "I won't. I'll try not to anyway." She knew this was just one more awful task she'd have to deal with on her own. "You know," said Sarah, stretching out on the sofa, "I feel guilty for being glad it's not me who's going through all this." "I wouldn't want to wish it on anyone." Over the radio flowed Stevie Nicks' husky voice. "I love dreams. It always makes me want to dance." Sarah chuckled and said, "No, really, you've got all this legal stuff to deal with, and I don't even understand one half of all that. And you've got to find somewhere to live within days, well, within 3 weeks anyway, and that still won't be the end of it." Bethany Rose shrugged but said nothing, staring at her feet instead. Her toenails were painted pink today. Will you be able to stay on at college? I doubt it. So what will you do, Bethany Rose? I have no idea. No job interviews coming up? None. Sarah rolled onto a side on the sofa to face Bethany, who sat across the room. You know, and I know you're going to hate this idea, but maybe you should just think about it. You could always go home. To your parents' home, I mean. No. Sarah gazed around the room. Sunshine streamed in through the wide bay windows. It was a gorgeous home. Hello, Rosie. You come to join us, darling. It was a gorgeous home. It must be horrible to have it, then lose it again so quickly, she thought. She was so glad that she didn't have to face these things. She had no intention of marrying or being tied down by a mortgage. Not until she was a lot older, anyway. Dating and clubbing were too much fun to swap for dull domesticity. And she hadn't even been to any proper nightclubs yet, only to the kids' ones. She couldn't wait to turn 18 so she could go to Rock City. She had tried sneaking in, but she could never get past the cynical doorman. Now Bethany was single again. She'd be able to start dating and it would be fun, just like it had been before Brian had spoiled things. Well, maybe that was a bit harsh, thought Sarah, but he had effectively taken her best friend away. I know one thing we could do, said Sarah, sitting up. What? There's a New Age festival on over the weekend. Let's go and have our futures read. Bethany started smiling. They're probably all fakes. Sarah shook her head. I had an aunt who swore by it. She used to read tarot cards. What happened to her? She died. Bethany Rose laughed warmly. It didn't do her much good then, did it? The New Age Festival was held in the function room of a mock Tudor pub. When Bethany Rose arrived outside, Sarah was peering through nearby shop windows rather than be seen hovering by the pub door on her own. She looked cold. Her chin was buried in a green woolly scarf. Have you been waiting long? Asked Bethany. Only my bus was running a bit late. Actually, she had walked into town to save money, but didn't want Sarah to know this. About 5 minutes, that's all, but I'm already bored looking at granny shoes. It's a wonder this shop stays in business. They've no clue how to dress a window. Sarah rolled her brown eyes contemptuously. Bethany turned towards the pub. Oh no, look who's outside. Sarah looked towards a small group of protesters, handing out leaflets to anyone attending the festival. They're from my parents' church. Bethany wanted to add the word unfortunately, but refused to kowtow even that much. They can't stop you going in. No, of course not, said Bethany, trying to appear confident. What I do is none of their business. Come on then, said Sarah, slipping her arm under Bethany's as they walked briskly over the narrow road, dodging a black taxicab. They wove their way along the crowded pavement towards the Tudor Inn. As they approached the open doorway, one of the church group stepped forwards. I hope you're not planning to go in there, Bethany Rose Rathbone. Your parents won't be pleased, I'm sure. The elderly lady glowered. Well, I'm sure you'll enjoy telling them all about it, won't you, Mildred Posset, said Bethany with icy sweetness. Mildred folded her stout arms and seemed reluctant to step aside. Her dog-toothed check coat stank of cigarettes. We've not seen you in church for some time. No, you haven't, said Bethany. Mildred gave one long, slow nod, her mouth a tight line. She thrust a pamphlet towards Bethany's face, forcing her to lean back slightly to avoid being struck. You should know these words by heart, but reading them again won't do you any harm. Looks like you need it. I'm perfectly familiar with Bible tracts, thank you, said Bethany, starting to guide Sarah around the obstinate woman. She deliberately left Mildred still clutching the pamphlet. Then you should know that God said we shouldn't suffer a witch to live. Her hard voice was laced with self-righteous conviction. Bethany Rose turned to meet Mildred's glare. Actually, no, God did not say that. Human men thought it up and called it law, and centuries after that another man named Jesus told people that judgmental behaviour, bigotry and violence of any sort have no place in his teachings. Look it up for yourself. It's right there in your favourite book. Then she turned on her heel, her head held high, and led Sarah inside the broad entrance of the pub, where a gaudy poster advertised a New Age fair, and up the steep flight of creaking wooden stairs to the function room. Sarah began laughing. You showed her all right. What, that sour old bat. She'll not be able to rest now until she's run to my parents with gleeful tales of my descent into evil. The girls were still laughing when they paid the small entrance fee on the landing. A needle-thin woman who perched over the old biscuit tin used to collect the money broke into a little smile at their infectious humour as she waved them inside. Trestle tables lined the edges of the moderately sized function room, with two more rows going widthways across the middle. Each vendor had decorated their rented space in accordance with their own tastes and skills. Most had done little more than drape a cotton tablecloth over the cheap wood, then prop up colourful handmade signs declaring things like traditional palm reader or mystic daughter of the ancients. Isn't she more of a mystic granny? Hissed Sarah behind a cupped hand. Shush, she'll hear you, giggled Bethany. Let's have a look at that jewellery stall. They self-consciously made their way around the almost empty room. The vendors outnumbed the customers 2-1. Sarah bought herself a pair of earrings with a yin-yang symbol on them, and Bethany was tempted to have her aura photographed, but for that asking price, she decided the glorious colours of her astral body would have to remain a mystery. It's not much of a New Age festival, is it? Said Sarah. I suppose not, but I've not been to one before, so I've nothing to compare it to. She suspected Sarah had never been to one before either, but knew Sarah would hate this being commented on. It's mostly wrinklies topping up the pensions, Sarah smirked. But we're here now, so we'll have to have something read. It seems a waste otherwise. What'll it be? Tea leaves, palm, or tarot? Bethany felt. Are you comfortable there, young lady? So, Rosie's having a good old wriggle there. Where are we? Bethany felt unsure. You go ahead, I'll just watch. She didn't feel able to spend money on something which she didn't absolutely need. The fees being asked were higher than she'd expected. Oh, come on, said Sarah, starting to pout. I'm paying. Bethany felt embarrassed that her friend had guessed the reason for her reluctance. She gazed around the room and spotted what seemed a sensible solution. Well, look, if we have our tea leaves read, then at least we get a hot cuppa into the bargain. I could do with a drink anyway. Oh, trust you, Sarah grinned. One of these days you'll turn into a tea bag. They walked towards the white-haired lady who sat next to a steaming urn of hot water. Her table was set out like a perfectly ordinary kitchen table, with a pristine floral cloth and a large white china teapot. A plate of sugary biscuits with crimped edges sat amidst a half-circle of clean cups upturned on saucers. That's an expensive cup of tea, said Bethany. Sarah nearly snapped something about being fed up of hearing Bethany whine about money, especially as she wasn't even paying this. Sarah felt guilty for buying the earrings, and also irritable because if Bethany hadn't been with her, she would have bought several other things too, such as the dainty coral bracelet, which would have matched the top she was wearing, or a colourful pack of tarot cards and some Indian incense. But she felt mean spending money when she knew Bethany could not. Sarah frowned and decided not to invite Bethany Rose next time a New Age festival was held. She'd come along and spend what she liked on whatever she liked without feeling mean. She wanted to have fun, and dealing with Bethany's gloom was boring, even if she did feel horrible for admitting this to herself. She wanted to be thought of as a good friend, but Bethany's problems were too much of a burden. Can I interest you two young ladies in having your leaves read? The elderly vendor asked, smiling kindly. Her stained teeth were badly in need of a dentist's attention. Bethany tried not to giggle at the idea of having leaves. Maybe if she stood still long enough she'd be mistaken for a tree trunk. But Sarah was smiling back and nodding. Then take a seat, my dears, while I make a nice pot of tea. See how I use loose leaves? Tea bags are no good. Sarah broke into giggles, then said to Bethany, See, I always said you were trouble. The white hen vendor looked puzzled. It's my nickname, said Bethany, blushing slightly. What is, dear? Tea bag? The vendor smiled indulgently, as if she was used to teenagers' quirks. Do sit down, dears, won't you? The water will come back to the boil in a minute, and then we can get on with it. Sarah and Bethany immediately sank down upon 2 wooden folding chairs, which looked as if they might have been brought from an auction of dilapidated school furniture. They unbuttoned their coats and put their bags on the floor between their ankles so no one could steal them, as it seemed obvious that they'd be there for a while. I'm Ethel Morrison, by the way. Oh, did you expect a fancy made-up name? Some people are impressed by that sort of thing, but I always thought they sound a bit daft. It's always the Great Mage or the Amazing Mystic or some such rubbish. Nobody ever calls himself the Mediocre Magician or the Terrible Tarot Reader, even if that's more accurate. Now then, said Ethel, pouring boiling water from a stainless steel urn into the ceramic teapot, let's say a blessing over these sacred leaves, and then we'll see what's what. Bethany Rose tried not to smirk at the idea of holy tea leaves. A mischievous giggle threatened to creep up the inside of her throat and erupt into helpless laughter. The more she tried to push it down, the more the giggle tickled its way upwards. She felt sure her neck must have been growing wider. She dug her fingernails into the palms to force herself to behave. Sarah seemed intrigued, watching the vendor's every movement. Right then, said Ethel, smiling confidently as she set the teapot back on its stand. Let's begin. If you want to find out what the tea leaf reading revealed, you'll have to read the book. Rosie, meanwhile, is joining in here. Say hello, Rosie. See, she's waving hello. Gorgeous little girl, isn't she? So I'll leave you to it for now. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that. Leave me a comment in the Rosie, leave me a comment in the section below if you wish to, and in the corner there is a subscribe button. Press on that and you won't miss any of my forthcoming videos. I've got a whole pile of them planned. Thanks for watching. See you soon.